Hello guys and welcome to all. Today we're going to talk about what's happening in the US tech sector with Nicholas Thompson, the CEO of The Atlantic, a well-known American media. Let's welcome him. Hello Nick, welcome to the Kitchen Talk. It's great to have you on the show. So how are you and where are you joining us from?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to see you. I'm joining from Brooklyn, New York.
Fantastic. So Nick, let's start. I think probably people from the audience might know who you are. You've been leading editorial teams at The New Yorker and Wired. And today you are the CEO of The Atlantic. Well, congratulations. Well done. So how does it feel like being a CEO after being a chief editor?
It's a little bit different. In my old jobs, I was the editor-in-chief, so I assigned the stories. I read the news fervently every day. But I also worked on the business strategy. Now, I just work on the business strategy. I don't assign the stories. So there's a little bit of a different cadence to the day, a little bit of a additional emotional roller coaster. Problems are slightly different, but it's pretty great. I love trying to solve the problems I'm trying to solve. I love trying to help the Atlantic thrive. I love trying to set us on a course for success for the next 10, 20, 150 years.
Sounds really exciting. So what is your number one mission today at The Atlantic?
Well, the number one mission for me is to set up a business model that funds the best journalism in the world sustainably for a long period of time. So figure out how we balance different revenue streams, where we invest, where we expand, what we can do, and try to set a foundation so that the reporters and writers and editors and everybody else can go out, cover the most important stories in the world in the best way possible.
So Nick, you spoke a lot about our relationship with technology, and what it means to be human. So what role do you think technology should play in our daily lives?
Well, I don't think we get to choose. I think technology changes the nature of our daily lives, and it does it different ways every day, from the way we interact with our phones to the systems that monitor us as we go about our days to all the technology in our lives. Almost everything we do is changed in some way by technology as we go. When we finish this interview, I'm about to go head out through a city where the stores are changing because of the nature of technology, where once the cars change, the whole layout of the city will change. Technology is going to change everything that we do. And of course, it will change my job, it will change my work, it'll change my life, it'll change my relationships, the way I interact with people, it'll change the political system in I live. So it's everywhere. We just have to understand it as best we can and adapt to it.
And in terms of culture, what do you think what impact it has on technology?
Yeah, so technology helps define our culture. It determines, what we watch, right? Technology has changed the nature of the companies that present content. It has changed the kind of people who become stars, who define culture. It changes the way we think about the dynamic between the stars and us. Culture changes the nature of how storytelling works, changes the way we absorb that storytelling, changes the way we discuss that storytelling. So on all these different levels, technology is transforming culture in many ways that are beneficial and some that are confusing.
So I hear what you're saying. So technology is somehow redefining actually what it means to be human. Don't you think we are putting lots of hopes and expectations in technology?
Well, a lot of hopes, expectations, but also fears. I mean, if you take any one of the things I've talked about, whether it's politics or jobs, let's talk about jobs, right? Technology is going to, at the very least, transform the job you do. It might also replace the job you do, but it could also create the next job that you do. So our work lives will be defined in part by the capacities of computers, how intelligent artificial intelligence gets, how companies change. So for many of us, we'll be doing different work in different ways because of technology. So my argument is just let's understand it as best we can, make ourselves as flexible as we can, and then roll with it.
All right, so let's now talk about what's going on right now in the US tech market. So we see Elon Musk buying Twitter. What it means for big tech?
Well, it's going to be a huge change for Twitter, and there's a whole range of outcomes, right? There's the possibility that he will fix its problems, right? Twitter is hugely influential, doesn't make a lot of money, has all kinds of problems. People being afraid of it, the small number of people who actually post, misinformation spreading, questions about speech. Musk has an unparalleled track record. He could come in and just as he did with electric cars and rockets, figure out whatever the fundamental underlying problem is of Twitter and he could fix it. And that could fix the communications infrastructure. He could also go in there, drive out all the good employees because they don't like him and he's mercurial, and he could break it. So Elon could fix or he could break Twitter. I don't know which is more likely. That will then have a cascading
Right.
effect on the other major social media platforms that compete with Twitter, have a big effect on the way politics and democracy works, at least in the United States, because Twitter is hugely influential on that. So Elon buying Twitter it's a story to watch.
Only time will tell, and we'll keep an eye on it. And you mentioned about the relationship between public and big tech. How has it evolved in the US?
Well, there's an interesting sort of wave where for a lot of my life, the public's relationship with big tech was an increasing sense of awe and joy, right? And the founders of big tech were among the most respected people in the country. That started to shift probably a little bit prior to the election of Trump, and then deeply with the election of Trump, and then with Facebook's Cambridge Analytica scandal and some of the scrutiny of big tech that came later. I think Europe became more skeptical of big tech more quickly. America followed. But then during the pandemic, it shifted again a little bit, where big tech was pretty essential to help us get through the pandemic, right? Where we depended on it, where we became dependent both on the big platforms and on new platforms that were small before the pandemic and became big. So then, since then, there's been probably another wave, and we're probably going to begin another backlash at some point fairly soon.
And as a media company, have you seen a change, in the way technology is being covered?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of for me, certainly when I was the editor of Wired, it was profoundly impactful because in the beginning, Wired was a real champion of big tech. And then we started to, my job at Wired was to try to cover tech as fairly and as deeply as possible. Over time, Wired became more critical because we saw some of the effects that big tech was having, and we wrote about surveillance, and we wrote about some of the algorithms that were affecting democracy, and we wrote about embedded racism and artificial intelligence. We covered these big stories. So we started to be seen as quite critical. And then the rest of the media, which had been fairly positive about big tech, really became extremely negative post the election of Trump. And so in some ways, Wired was in this funny spot where we stayed in the same position, but were perceived as having, become much less negative because our peers had become massively negative. So you always look at an institution's position on a spectrum, both on where it is and on where its peers are. So I personally had this funny sense where I went from being seen as a big critic to actually being kind of positive while I stayed in the same place because so many other people moved to the deeply critical side of the spectrum. It was kind of a funny thing to live through.
Right, so it's at least I'm glad to hear that there's a great evolution on that front. And what would you say is tech becoming more and more polarizing?
Yeah, it's becoming much more polarizing. I think that one of the consequences of a lot of the technological changes and of the way the coverage worked is that coverage of tech and opinions of tech really kind of diverged, and you can see fights break out. And you can see it most clearly in the debate over Web 3.0, right? There is a huge swath of the public that thinks this is the most profound, powerful, important salutary effect of technology in a generation. There's a huge swath of people who think it's all a bunch of scams and criminals. And I don't think there was that kind of a divergence on any technological issue prior to the last couple of years. There's much of Silicon Valley, which is profoundly resentful of the media, and there's a lot of the media that is profoundly resentful of Silicon Valley. That's new. So There has been a split and a polarization, absolutely.
And Nick, I think you're going to be with us in June at VivaTech this year, right? It's your first time?
I love VivaTech. I had such an amazing time last year. I'm so excited to come this year.
So it's not your first time. You've been there before. So I'm sure you're going to be busy. So you're going to do a couple of interviews for your media in French?
In French, yeah. Je peux parler un peu de français. No, I'll be interviewing
people. Un peu
people.
de français, magnifique.
Ah oui. Et je suis très excité de venir à Paris. I'll be doing my interviews in English.
Okay, brilliant. Fantastic. We're really looking forward to see you there. We are going to be there anyway, so hopefully we'll have time to grab a coffee or something. Thank you, Nick.
I'd love that. I'm so happy to be coming back.
And don't leave yet. We still have a few questions for you in the Speakeasy in a couple of seconds. And of course, if you like the video and you don't want to miss the next ones, feel free to subscribe to our channel. And I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye.
My ARM-based heart rate monitor, which I attach to my Garmin 935, and actually gives me accurate heart rate data. Both. I'm remote right now and going in the office in 15 minutes. Early riser. I get up at between 6 and 6:30. I start work then, and then I try to go to bed so that I'm rested when I get up at 6 or 6:30. The rise of autocracy and the decline of democracy. I drink a little bit, but very little. I drive a little bit too, but I never drink and drive. I tend to read books unless there's an urgent piece of information I need to look up, and then it's a Kindle. My favorite book that I read this year is probably James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. Oh, that's hard. Running first, reading and writing tied for second.